So, welcome everyone to yet another case discussion by Insightful Pediatric SLPs, where we actively look at peer interaction and engaging in understanding things that worked, things where we needed to backtrack and sort of work at better strategies. So, we have Anvita with us here today, and we are going to she's going to share a successful case of early intervention with us. So I'll just share my screen here. So the Playroom Dream Team in early intervention wins. Anvita here has completed her BSLP as well as MSLP from AYJ NISHD Mumbai. Among her trainings and certifications are Certificate of Clinical Competence from the American Speech Language and Hearing Association and DIR Floor Time Level 1. She's an associate therapist at Speech Dysphagia Language Clinic in Mumbai. She's a consultant SLP and audiologist at Surya Hospitals in Mumbai. She's a consultant SLP at Yellow Brickway, Mumbai, and an ex-consultant at SSC and ESC American School of Bombay. She has also been a ex-guest faculty at AYJ NISHD in 2023. She has also been a guest faculty member for students pursuing B.Ed in special education about the role of SLPs at SIES College in 2017. And she has also been a judge for a debate competition for students with specific learning disabilities in 2020. So, welcome, Anvita, and really looking forward for your case today. Please share your screen.
Hi, the Bosmita. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this case and for this wonderful platform. It truly requires great effort and initiation from your end. So I am very grateful and I've got this chance today to do it. And I hope that something that I have learned from my experience just helps everybody else. Like that's the best I can wish for.
Looking forward. Please.
So the Playroom Dream Team is early intervention wins is what I decided would be a great fit for this case that I want to present. So before I get into the details of the case, I'm just going to go over a couple of words that I highlighted, which I felt was super important. So I'm going to just share my screen and like my title suggests, the Playroom Dream Team, it's about play. Kids have the most important job in this world to do, which is to play. It's their way of experimenting, their way of looking forward to things, their way of understanding the world, because that's how we understand the world. We understand ourselves by trial and error. So when you give someone the space and the opportunity, they come up with great ideas. So if you could just knowing for a fact, if you just observe these two pictures, what do you think they are? What do you think this child is doing in these pictures? Just your interpretation. Nothing wrong, nothing right. What do you think?
Appears like a track, right?
Mm-hmm.
One is definitely looks like a track.
Yeah.
The other one, I don't know, is a building in 2D, or it could also be a track.
Yeah. So the first one with the magnetiles was apparently a rocket or an aircraft that we
Ah.
built. And we were like, okay, let's do this. And we built an entire story on this. So he didn't want to stack up the magnetiles. I honestly thought just making building blocks would just be very boring. So I just showed him other shapes, ways to put the magnetiles. And then because we love rockets, we were like, okay, chalo, let's make a rocket. Why not? Airplane, you make up stories. And they are so silly. The rocket is taking me to some neighborhood which is in the city only, but I'm like, theek hai, fine. It's okay. Explore, remind, just, till they're trying to build connections, because
Correct.
sometimes so much that they know, they don't get the chance to express themselves, I feel, fully. And as adults, I think we are very responsible for allowing them to show, what's happening, how do you go about things in life. The second one started off as a train track, building over through mountains, but because we fell short of the tracks got over in the box, and he just didn't want to make it a simple circle. He took out the remaining Jenga blocks, and that was our pretentious track ahead. And then to match the elevation, it's like I must have helped with one book. Okay, let's try to match the elevation. All the remaining boxes came to the other kid. Like, let's put it together, let's put it together. So that is something what I do. And I think COVID was a turning point to make parents understand that this is not easy and that we are actually getting work done through this, because a lot of them they presume that speech therapy is just simply tabletop. And that was a very big myth breaker for me with my clients personally, where they understood that no, it is actually requiring a lot of effort and work. I'm going to come to the second one, which is something I'm a huge fan of, which is sensory play. Like, I love sensory play. I combine 2 toys, 3 toys, make them have fun, make them explore. It is so important because, hearing is not the only sense through which we learn. You have to incorporate other movements or textures, vision. And of course, I take help from the occupational therapist in certain spaces where I need to. But I'm a big believer in sensory play because that is the stepping stone to for your nervous system to explore the world and expand your opportunities to engage in other things. So it doesn't have to be a punishment. It I don't make it come across as a punishment. I don't make it come across as like a reward system. I ensure that when I do sensory play, even if it means sitting in that ball pit and reading a book, or hiding some sea animals inside, and okay, we're going, some kids go on like beach trips and they are familiar with diving trips and all that their parents do. Okay, we're going scuba diving. Fine, go scuba dive, find some sea animals. Even if they're not sea animals, it's a pretentious game that some other animals have gone scuba diving, some toys have gone scuba diving. So we do that. And that in itself, because the child is so interested in it, it helps them regulate themselves better. They are more with you. And then that's when I add new language, they pick up. They simply pick up really, really well. So it's the most crucial step, which is taken for granted, that we do not understand where the kids are coming from. And I had a parent tell me once that, when you come for therapy, at the end of it, no matter what, you want to feel good about it. And that stuck with me. So if we, even like, a lot of adults currently today, they take like counseling for themselves, which is great. Or if I go for physiotherapy for all my multiple injuries that I keep having, that all my friends would know, I do feel good about it at the end that, I did something for myself. That's the willingness I want my children to feel when they walk out from there, no matter whether I've achieved the goal, whether I've not achieved the goal, what I wanted to get in. A lot of times things don't go planned. I think we all have experienced that. Nothing really goes by the plan. So to be able to switch, explore, roam around. Also important for parents to understand that language is not learned tabletop. That's not how people who've not required speech and language services have learned language. We've all learned languages like even by simply mopping the floor or pressing buttons on the elevator. So these are just certain ways for parents to explore. So yeah, the background is of the painting of the kid who I am going to talk about. It's one of his paintings. So I just wanted to bring it up. And this is, of course, our pretend play. We've decided to make tents and make an airport and just multiply 2 to 3 things. They were very fascinated by the umbrellas. I'm like, fine, let's just make a tent out of it. And we actually sat in the tent and we worked the whole time. So I was kicked out of the tent. I was supposed to sit outside. I'm like, fine, okay. And it was like good fun. So this was when I progressed this kid towards group. Like we knew he had certain challenges because and we thought it would be better dressed in a group. Very friendly child, so why not? Let's make the most of it. So the one of the few keywords in this topic that I want to talk about is early intervention. But before I speak more on early intervention, what do you think what is early intervention? Like, yeah. Just any keywords, anything simple, nothing textbook. Even if you feel there's a particular feature that you understand, or what do you think is early intervention?
Mm, Developing prerequisite skills like joint attention, eye contact, and following the command, developing sitting. So these are the things we feel should be developed.
Yeah, we do feel they should be developed. And what else do you think is early intervention? Like, what is the reason we ask, like, parents, caretakers to, like, okay, we need to work on this at the earliest? Like, what do
There's
we?
a lot of neural connections happening at the brain level at early age. So, if there's a lot of language has been put, then they'll definitely develop faster and better language. So, that is
Yeah,
why the need of early intervention.
yeah. I think we have something in the chat.
Yashna, Yashna.
Uh,
Neuroplasticity. If it was one word, even I was going to say it.
yeah.
If
So
it's
that's exactly what we want. When we feel like there are certain things like, kids are, there's a process of growth, right? There's a process of development growth. And we want to ensure that every milestone that comes, there's a reason why we look at a particular milestone, because like everybody spoke, it's about the plasticity, it's about,
Yes, presentation 17 series. जो मेरी niece है ना,
all of that. So that's the importance of early intervention. Now, by a textbook definition, it's the process of providing services and supports to infants, toddlers, and their families when a child is, facing certain challenges or is likely to face certain challenges. So we want to make the most of the time before the damage really, really, really seeps in. And overall, in early intervention, the main goals are, we want to ensure there's communication development, there's like physical development, there's social emotional development, there's an adaptive development, because so much growth is happening in the child. It's not just, it's not just speaking, it's not just walking and talking. There's a lot of learning processes, a lot of demand on the system also. So sometimes you can't keep up. I believe it's as simple as that, or sometimes you just need more support to keep up. So those are the reasons I always advocate for early intervention. So yeah, that is the main highlight where I'm coming from. The second part in this entire thing is about neurodiversity. These are all terms that we all have been recently coming across a lot more since the pandemic. Though it was earlier, it was an entire thing set more vast. It was building up from the 90s, but still. So, what do you think is the difference in the terms neurodiversity, neurodivergent, neurotypical? Like, what do you feel?
neurotypical is, I think, the easiest one to get away with.
Yeah, it is. It really
So,
is.
so all of us, I think, who have done our masters and who has done a fair bit of statistics will understand that whatever comes under the bell curve will be neurotypical, like what is like 98% of the population, basically,
Yeah,
or maybe Cat saying it's close to 95 now because the umbrella for neurodiversity has increased
absolutely.
quite a bit. And neurodiversity means the fabric. Neurodivergent, I think, means the individual we are talking about or catering to, right?
Yeah. So, I'll give you another analogy. Basically, neurodiversity talks about all the brains, whichever
Hmm.
brain you have. Everyone's brain is different. Like how all our thumbprints are different. Even
Correct.
though DNA matches by 99.99%, that 0.001% makes a whole difference.
Yeah.
So neurodiversity is the bigger umbrella term that we
Yeah.
use. And then that we further divided between neurotypical and neurodivergent in.
Gent.
So the term neurotypical would be in, like, as you typically see kids progress, grow, develop, like, you
Yeah.
don't concerns. When we talk about the neurodivergent term, it includes individuals who are autistic, who have ADHD, who have specific learning disabilities, who also have Tourette syndrome, sensory processing issues. All of them would mean different. It's just that their brains, the way they function, is different, and that yeah, it's just very different how they function. It's not wrong. The physiologically, you're taking a different route. Like for example, if I want to reach home, there are two ways of reaching home. There's a shortcut, there's a long cut. So a neurotypical pathway would be like, okay, just take the simplest, easiest route. Some people are just like, no, we will take a longer route, we will take a different route, but we'll reach the same destination, and neither of them are incorrect.
Yeah, it's Yashna writes, it's more like wired, different, not wrong or flawed, just different, basically. And like you said, Anvita, I'll just add to you, the term is now even inclusive of individuals receiving diagnosis of BPD, bipolar, depression, a
Yes.
lot of other. So
Yeah.
it is like you said. The way
Yeah.
of viewing and doing is different, not wrong. Yeah.
And unfortunately, for the longest time, a lot of intervention programs, because they were
Yeah.
not studied so deeply, have focused on turning this neurodivergent brain into a neurotypical brain.
Yeah.
But all neurodivergent individuals have their own strengths, strengths that I have seen in adults as well that have
Yeah.
absolutely fascinated me. Like I know so many people who are like so focused on certain things, like they're so deeply driven into it. And I have always questioned myself, like, why can't I think like that? And I'm just okay. Like, I'm just okay with like, ha, theek hai, okay. And I have friends who like dive into the whole topic, and I'm like, fine, you educate me. I'm happy to listen to you, but I don't have it in me to do the research. So that is, I think, that was a standing point for me to see them as an adult, the
Correct.
difference between them. And it's just like, it's so important to understand. And I think there are two paths to it. A is to understand what neurotypical and neurodivergent brains are. B is to be able to apply the best to what we can do to a neurodivergent brain. So when you support someone's strength, um, they actually grow further than, trying to make them change. A lot of times I've seen people who, try to fix, try to correct, but what is the point of changing someone's for who they are? It's just like the most, it's the toughest thing you're doing is you're not accepting the person for who they are.
Yeah.
And there's no way someone will trust you if you do not accept the person for who they are. That's the
Who they are.
first
Correct.
and foremost process of therapy, be it any therapy. You have to accept that this is what the individual is
Is.
and build them up on their strengths, which unfortunately gets taken aback because we are so thrown into, following those goals, following this, following that,
The
you
milestones. Yeah.
milestones. Yeah, we will get to the milestones for sure, but we are just forcing them to be like us and we're not letting them contain their personality, their individuality.
Yeah.
Is not okay. And I don't, like I said, it's been a process of learning after like college and everything. And that's also more than enough, I feel, to grow as an individual. So this was one of the key terms. And there are certain things about neurodiversity affirming practices, like, and the first and foremost is respect all communication styles. And I think this is something I keep on emphasizing to the parents, which is so neglected because it's such an easy thing to say, but it is so hard to acknowledge. Like, today, if you are not in a state of mind to talk to someone on the phone, you will text the person, you will not call them up. And and we accept it. So sometimes a kid will not verbally say no, but will probably move their body away, shake their head for a no, or just, shut their eyes, walk away. And we, unfortunately, we are like, no, but you say the word no. Why? What are you getting out of it? He's saying no to you. We do not force people to call us. We do not force people to text us. None of that happens. So why are we forcing a child to say no? It's okay. And if we don't, like I said, it's all about acceptance. If you don't accept it, appreciate it, they're going to shut down even further. You wouldn't open up as a friend to someone also if people are just going to shut you down, right? So why will they open up to you? Why will they listen to you? Why will they trust you for, why are they coming to you? Then it's just you're wasting their time and your own time. So that strength-based approach. So a lot of people, the first thing is that we always want to see what a child cannot do. Like you said, textbook milestones. अच्छा ये नहीं कर रहा, ये नहीं कर रहा, ये नहीं कर रहा, ये नहीं कर रहा. What about the things that he can do? There is so many other things that he can do. There's always something a child can do, and you can always build on that. You can always expand on what they're showing you, which I don't see as a harm. I don't see it as a harm. I always try to understand, like, suppose there are kids who, like, we know a lot of kids who are diagnosed with like autism or like ADHD and stuff. They like objects moving in a circular motion, and sometimes that gives them more of like a sense of regulation, calmness. So why not we build on that? Why do we force them to change what they like? It's like, I can't change your favorite song or your favorite cuisine. Why am I forcing them to change what they like to do? So that's another strength based thing. See what works for them and build on that. And we always like, we feel like, no, this person is not ready for doing certain things, like, especially when it's coming to using AAC with the neurodiverse population that is minimally verbal. We assume that they cannot use AAC. So why do we do that? They are They probably can do a lot more if we just let them show what they can do. So these are the key words to my presentation, which I wanted to highlight. This has definitely, I think, understanding all this in the last half a decade now has helped me grow to leaps and bounds as a clinician. Because the minute we made the switch, so where I work with SDLC, when we made the switch to working, following the neurodiversity principles very consciously about 5-6 years ago, we could just see the change in way the children started responding to us. And that has really helped us build through and get together. It is definitely time consuming, like, getting to certain goals may have taken us longer, but we know for a fact that it's not hampered them emotionally and it is sticking with them forever. So I think that's the most important thing to see. So this child who came to me was about 2 years, 1 month old. He was referred by a pediatrician, and the parent concerns are verbatim of what the mom told me, was that he hadn't achieved speech goals associated and he understands everything. He has a few words, but there's no like combining words together. And he lives with his mom and dad and has a full-time caretaker. Mom is a full-time she works, so she's quite busy. And the dad was living overseas, and the father had a diagnosis of ADHD, which was a proper medical diagnosis given to him in the US. That's where he came from. So he was born at 36 weeks. He had a tongue tie when he was born. The tongue tie was like taken care of within the first few days. He had a lot of reflux. He used to throw up a lot of food, and he had a little eczema. So apart from that, nothing major. He used to sleep through the night. He used to take a nap. Everything was good. He got his first word, and his first word was quite funny. When I asked the mom what his first word was, it was no. That was the first thing he learned to say, was no, very meaningfully. Learned a few more words, did crawl, had no regressions in his speech milestones. And yeah, he did crawl quite a bit. So there was, I deep dived into feeding history because I feel sleep and feeding history gives a lot going on about the person's overall well-being, including the systems that work for speech and language. They also work for feeding, swallowing, breathing. So it gives a lot of insight into what's happening with the child. So there was a lactation consult required, given the fact that he had a tongue tie. He breastfed, followed by mix, followed by getting to solids. He weaned himself off independently. And when I saw him at the age of 2, he was drinking water through that 360 cup. He was quite okay with it, quite independent in that way. Next. Okay. So these were the few language things that he had. He was labeling things around him. He was imitating a lot more. So there were a lot more words coming through imitation rather than, just independently speaking when I saw him. When he really a need-based communication was done by dragging the person towards the place, there was a limitation in how he would generalize words. Like if he would open a particular book, he would recognize it as a horse or a dog or, like a bulldozer. But given the same image in a different context, he was unable to name it. That's where he came from. He had high, deep interests in vehicles. Later on, by numbers, letters, dinosaurs. He had trouble imitating rhymes also, but the rhymes that he was familiar with, he was very okay, like, doing it. And a lot of echolalia was being observed. And it was initially hard to understand what he was saying. So that's where I started with him. He also, yeah. So what happened after this was that I started looking into more language features that included rich intonation patterns. Is he having scripts? Is he having gestals? Is he having, there's a term called echopraxia. Was he like stuck on single words? Was he learning and listening from media? Media is not limited to just videos, but also like just audio. And was he very musical? Like what was he actually enjoying? So after observing him for a couple of sessions, because he was at this age of 2 to 2.5, my brain started going like, is his learning style analytical or is it gestalt? And of course, over a period of few months, we did realize that he is leaning more towards, being a Gestalt language processor. Now, what is Gestalt language? People talk about it. Okay, like everywhere, full time. हाँ, ये तो GLP है, GLP. What is GLP? What do we exactly do? And my biggest question out there is it only limited to language? Because it just cannot be language, it's the whole body. The whole body is experiencing things differently. Now, I love this analogy. I absolutely love it. I think it highlights beautifully what Gestalt means. So it's a language, it's a style of learning language. It's not wrong, it's different. It's just a different way of learning language. And there are steps in it. Okay. I'm simplifying it with these images. So if you observe the two chocolate bars on the left over here, there's a white chocolate bar and there's like a dark chocolate bar. So what they say in this analogy is like you assume this entire chocolate bar is a gestalt. A gestalt is like a word or a set of words that are seen as one entire unit. So your white chocolate, if you see the example on the right, it's cleanup time. That is the whole phrase. It's the whole chocolate. They see it as one thing, one chocolate bar. It could be a big piece, it could be a small piece. For them, it's just one. Unlike for someone with an analytical style of learning, they break it down into 4 parts. And we've all studied in college extensively about your left brain is analytical, right is gestalt, part to whole, whole to part learning. This is a whole to part learning process. So that's how you can view it as one entire chocolate bar. Now, what happens is when they start listening to certain words constantly in different contexts, it gets to them that they can mix and match. So if you see what they've done here is they've mixed 2 chocolate bars together. That means a part of it is coming from one big unit that is being broken down now, and they're trying to experiment. If I have to give you another example, it would be like, I know that these 5 beads make one entire chain. Okay. What if after making multiple of those chains, I decide to just replace one bead with, say, another stone? That would be you're breaking it down slightly, you're experimenting, you're mitigating, you're moving things around a bit here and there. Followed by which then they realize, oh, these words can be broken down even further. Okay. So then they can isolate the fact that there are single words and each word has its own meaning. And when you combine words together, when you try to get them together, it holds a whole different meaning. So instead of learning like car and, car or red car as 2 words separately in a smaller process, they first experience the whole thing. It's the word gestalt, like it holds the meaning of whole. Take a holistic experience. That's how they learn language. So they realize it from 4 parts to then 3 parts, and then they break it down. Then once you're comfortable with, and when does the breakdown happen is the breakdown happens is when you understand the meaning of it further and further. Because only when we get the meaning of language better is when we can experiment using it differently. Otherwise, you will never learn how to express yourself. Followed by which they start experimenting to form newer phrases, newer sentences. They could make errors. And when they are making errors is when we know that they are experimenting with something new. So we don't correct the errors directly by saying that, oh, say this, say that, or you're wrong. You simply model the right way of saying it grammatically. So that's when we then start looking into other things. And at this point, if I have to even associate it, it's like how you have your 2-word typical development, 2-word phrases, 3-word phrases, simple sentences, then that's what it looks like. So it's following the path of picking up language, just that it's taking 2 steps extra to come to the point of, building up longer sentences. We realized this at the age 3 months into his therapy. It could be confusing between 2.5, because a lot of features do look similar, and it can be confusing whether a person is analytical, whether it's gestalt. Irrespective of the fact, the strategies that we use for gestalt do work with the analytical learners most of the times. It's similar. It's about how you use those strategies, and we've all studied in our first year of undergrad. Like, I remember studying the terms in the first year of undergrad. It's just about applying it, correctly without overwhelming the kid. So as the child is growing, getting ahead further and further, you can see them forming more complex sentences, trying longer strings, and they do get to it. They do get to it. Now, the entire process of them reaching this depends on the level at which we support them. Also, in general, not specifically, this is not limited to just verbal communication. It could also be in the form of AAC. You do see this with minimally verbal speakers as well. Now, why Dream Team? So one of the key players for me in this team to see this child's progress was to get in an occupational therapist. So mom's biggest concern was that she wanted the child to talk. Like, and of course, any parent comes to us like we want the child to communicate verbally. He should be able to do certain things, but there's a lot of process that goes alongside with it. This child, on observing, learned a lot from movements. Learned a lot from like the minute he was given movement, which was more meaningful, he was picking up language better. He was able to generalize language better. He was able to grow better. So then I obviously thought that what if we give him meaningful movement? Maybe his body requires more movement than what, he's looking out for, because he was seeking movement every time he was coming. I was spending 20-25 minutes. That's when I had the occupational therapist come in. He was also showing like this W sitting posture, which we know is not the best for our body. And he was getting very distracted. Like, I get it, kids get distracted, but this was just getting a little like, why is every one thing walking into the room just overwhelming him so much? Why is every move so quick, so fast? And do I want him to still go through this? Is it something which is, like sensory not fitting in for him? So I decided to get the occupational therapist in. What we did was to support this child. We decided to combine our sessions together. So she would take care of the movement bit, and I would take care of the language given during that movement, is what we plan to do. So the occupational therapist knew how to speak to him as well during the session. So there is generalization of the strategies that we are learning. I also learned what works for the child, in case he's getting dysregulated, in case he's showing me certain different kind of body movements, what's working for him, not working for him, because she was also sensory certified. She's a sensory integrated therapist as well. So that came from the point of sensory processing. When we see someone with sensory processing, either they are seeking or they are lacking, or there's a combination of both. And that's another whole complicated breakdown, which can be an entire discussion in itself. So it's just that sensory processing, it's the brain's ability to orient, regulate, and use multisensory information to successfully complete activities. And they also help us lay the foundation of a variety of behaviors, skills like, emotional effect and the ability to focus, fine motor. All of this also goes in hand to hand with a lot of daily activities that we do. And we all know that behaviors just do not surface from anywhere. There's always a reason why there's something happening. There's always a reason why a person behaves in certain ways. So we need to get to the crux of it. This child had, we had to work, he had a little low tone. Going further into school, we were concerned about his grip, writing skills. He was seeking a lot of vestibular movement, proprioception, tactile. So the goal, and he also had like bilateral feet. That's something the Otis was looking into. And we wanted to work on his impulse control, seeing how his meltdowns were, providing the family with certain calming strategies. Like, if you tell someone to calm down when they are angry, it's the silliest thing to do by telling the person, hey, calm down. And I'm like, you're not helping me. Like, that just does not work. So that's something we wanted to focus with the family on, like how do we, and every kid responds differently to different things. That's something we all built together. What we wanted to also do is give him little more movement that we felt his body would benefit from. Provide the movement in a way that actually enhances his learning, because if he is not receiving the amount of sensory input that he requires, this could, we do not want this to bring up problems with school. Schools will complain. We all know how schools are. ये नहीं हो रहा है, वो नहीं हो रहा है. 50 lists of things that they can't do. Nothing that the child can do half the time. So we didn't want to reach that level with him. So we were just ensuring that as he was growing, we could understand his body better and we could help the family understand the child better. So his progress went from, in terms of communication, to just single words and dragging the person, improved repetition, which came a lot with the movement, how he started mitigating sentences, that also included mitigation of rhymes. Like, if I have to give you an example, instead of saying the wheels of the bus go round and round, we started going like the wheels of the car go round and round, or the wheels of the train go round and round, you know? So we kept changing rhymes like that. So if Humpty Dumpty didn't have a fall, Peppa Pig had a fall. Like, just being creative. So it helps them explore. He then, by the first year of his therapy, he came to a lot of mitigation, followed by which I think once he started school also, it did help him in certain ways, started developing a lot of more individual language, independent language, sorry, and build it up with a lot of errors. Eventually, the errors also reduced. In terms of expanding his growth and ideas, since he was super, super interested first in vehicles and construction related stuff, then he was interested in a lot of movement based games, or, like a lot of sensory games also, for that matter of fact. Eventually, as I mitigated language, I mitigated his play. I introduced the two of them together. Like, okay, we can incorporate sensory and construction vehicles, like scooping the sand, scooping the rice, scooping foam, whatever melts, it's fine, it's okay. Like, we've actually filled rice in the cement mixer toy that we had, and then we were both struggling to clean up the cement mixer together because the rice was stuck, and it was quite fun to even deal with that. And along with that, when he started doing group sessions, because he reached a point so he was with me for almost 3 years. He reached a point where we felt that we wanted him to generalize his language skills and expand his forms of communication, which were getting a little limited with me. And it would make more sense to see how is he with his own age peers, because that is a challenge for a lot of neurodivergent individuals as well. So, an older person, like an adult, would be great, or a baby would be fine, but anyone in their 1-2 years of age difference was a challenge for him. So he was very friendly otherwise. So, but sharing the same space in the room, seeing somebody else's ideas, being able to follow that was we know kids don't easily share things. And that's the whole thing, we did not force him to share. We were like, okay, when you're ready, you can let me know. It's okay, maybe you're not ready to share. And that was again using the principles of neurodiversity in language, that just simply using that made it much easier for him to understand that he can also be okay with sharing, but he can also be okay with not sharing, which is fine. It's absolutely fine. And then, of course, when somebody would take his own things, he did not sometimes know how to ask for them. He was getting a little more impulsive. And, again, being like, hey, like hitting could hurt someone. Maybe it's easier for you to do. Also, we know that carrying out a motor action with the hand is relatively easy to hit someone than to say something, please give this back to me. It's an easier task to plan for the brain. So breaking that down, that, okay, it's fine. I know you're upset, and maybe we can try together. So I would model the language for him. And then he would keep building upon his own ideas and inviting everybody and, expanding their ideas. He became very bossy, wanted to take control of the whole session, which we were okay with till no harm was caused. And, till his language goals were being met. There was in terms of occupational therapy, there was a need to improve certain interoception skills for like basic needs, which once got better, we started using a lot of labels. We started using a lot of emotion labels to things, started linking them with feelings. And then he made a lot of understanding to, attempt and to manage the whole situation for himself. So, of course, this was over a period of 2.5 years. And there were like days when he came, there were days when he did not come. But it was actually truly working. The fact that the occupational therapist and I worked together really served purpose. And we took the advantage of him being below 3 years of age, which we didn't want to miss either. This was his entire process of the communication functions. There was a lot of labeling, there was a lot of refusing. That was his first word as well. Use single words first. Started interacting more in general. Started requesting for things better. by keeping his own body safe. He independently started answering questions, and there was no targeted goal for questions with him. The fact that we just kept building his language so strongly, he automatically started answering questions. His understanding grew. So there was no goal that I ever wrote in any of my reports for him also, that, the child will demonstrate understanding of why, understanding of who. It was just not required. And yeah, then we further went upon answering questions, labeling emotions. We got better. Then we moved on to interacting. And the most important part was to advocate for himself and to be able to co-regulate his body. Because, I mean, he was still a little small. So I did not expect him to be a 10 out of 10 at the age of 4 years old. Now, the most crucial dream team member for this entire situation was the caretakers. And this is one caretaker I have absolutely loved. I haven't seen a better nanny than her till today, working 6 years independently. I have to give her, I give her all the thumbs up. She has been so inclusive in the whole process. She's taken tips so seriously from us. She's come back to us with, her concerns that she's seen. We've helped her with solutions, given her feedback, how to say things, how to go about things with him. And because he spent so much time with her, the way he adapted and generalized was absolutely beautiful to watch. Like, it was stunning. So what I basically, very basic, which, looks less, but sometimes I feel quality is better than quantity. And people just, assume that this much is enough. Like, itna bus ho gaya. Uh, itna kyun bus hai? Why don't you give us more suggestions? But if I have to genuinely ask you, what do you think when, people, you must have overheard caretakers a lot of times saying, okay, beta, say bye. It is so, do you agree or disagree with me? It is so hard for them to eliminate the word say. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Wholeheartedly agree.
Na?
So, my first session in the morning today,
Mm-hmm.
father prompting the child, say hi to auntie, hi to auntie. And to model, it's a year I'm working with that kid. To model, I turned at the dad with the child and I said, bye, Papa. He said, bye, Papa. I'm like, yeah. He's repeating, so why not just gift him the phrase that he should repeat instead of, overloading his processing that what should I eliminate?
Exactly, exactly. I think one of the biggest things that I told this caretaker, and I started saying it to all my parents till then, was that, okay, now you go to work, right? We all go to work. Now, what if constantly someone is telling you, Arey, you have to do, like someone's micromanaging you? You're not going to be able to take it. No human being can take it. What do you expect a 2-year-old to take or a 3-year-old to take micromanaging, not managing, micromanaging? So, A, he is going to get frustrated. B, commands don't teach us how to speak, because that's not how I have grown up. That's not how I have learned 5 languages. So definitely that doesn't work. Again, it's a longer process. C, I always feel that, sometimes, especially when it comes to the Gestalt learners, when they want to repeat a phrase, they may be wanting to say, say my name is Anvita Marfatia. But because they are at that level where they've not been understand to break it down into words, instead of saying my name is Anvita Marfatia, they'll be like, say my name is Anvita Marfatia. And that will confuse you as a listener. So do you wish to confuse yourself further? You decide. And then when they don't listen, and when this confusion is coming up, now they're like, now what to do? Now I'm like, you have to be patient. You have to model it this way. It is going to go away, but it requires time. So a lot of times, it's very important to have them eliminate questions. And I mean, what do you think? What are your takes on questions and communication?
Questions is extremely limiting, right? And like any kid who is coming to us definitely does not understand. If you go back to again, like you said, first year UG, I just love it when you give that. क्या सीखा था चॉम्स्की का? What is the function of language? Among the 5 functions of language, question, tells us neurotypicals that, okay, I don't have this information and I need it from somebody, right? If I ask you the time, if I
Yeah.
ask you the direction, a child does not have this social lens of what is the role of a question.
Right. They
So,
don't And it's like, being constantly interviewed. It's been like constantly you're putting them on demand. It's like examining. Like
Yeah,
questions and vivas have frightened me enough. I don't
yeah,
need questions in my life, like what?
exactly.
Okay, I always tell parents, like, let's use questions when we really need to, when you absolutely, absolutely need to. And I think parents really struggle with it. They just cannot eliminate questions as much as, you say. And my
Because
first
that's the traditional way of teaching, right? You teach the answer to a question. That's the traditional teaching.
Yeah, and then that's when I tell the parents, I'm like, okay, would you be able to answer questions that I ask you if you don't know the answer of it? That would frighten you up, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, then do you think your child knows the answer to this? How are you teaching them the answer? By saying the question, they're not learning anything out of it. And then they just go like, oh,
ऐसा कैसे?
ऐसा कैसे? Then they'll be like, our child doesn't talk to us, but he talks to you. I'm like, so the whole point of having you in with me in the session is that see what I'm doing, see how I'm interacting, you know, just watch and and I think I make a very explicit rule that please, if you're going to come to scroll on Instagram Reels for your me time and be with me in the room, you rather sit outside. Don't
Yeah.
do that. Just don't. You're not helping me at all. Like, don't micromanage me. Don't make it miserable for me. You can step out. Though, eliminating the questions, I always tell parents, like, ask yourself, how would you convert it into a sentence? Give yourself a 2-second pause to make it more meaningful. A lot of times, language, which was very important for me to address with parents, is about compliance as well. And if you do this, then you get this. Why do you want to label someone doing something with like a, what do you say, like a bribe? Why? Why is communication a bribe? It's not helping anyone. I wouldn't want to communicate with anyone who's bribing me. You know, it's just scary. You don't feel like talking to that person. Um, Also, this very famous phrase which people keep saying, use your words. I mean, it makes me angry 11 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, yeah. Totally, totally,
It, it's
totally.
Yeah, it's just so upsetting. And I'm like, what do you mean by use your words? That's the whole reason they're coming to me because they are not able to use their words. And maybe right now they're communicating it to you differently. Why can't you just accept it? One day they will say it instead of throwing a brick at you, they will like just say it, but just allow them. It's just like it comes across as such a punishment when people say use your words and okay, he's stepping back. It's a no. You can see that, right? He's struggling. It's okay.
And that is why I can't use my words, That is the,
And I'm unable to use my words. So please accept me for what I can do right now. And just honestly, deepening connections just helps a lot. That's why, if you have a great relation with your child in the session, you will see them open up to you a lot better. If, it depends on how you make them feel. And I think it's so important to make people feel what they want to feel and build upon that. And we overlook it in kids. I feel unconsciously somewhere we forget that they are also humans. They also have their own feelings. They're just not at where we are right now because they're still growing and learning. But giving them that space to be themselves will just be like, you'll be amazed by things that they can do. And I'm so glad that 6 years of doing this, more than 6 years now, since my master's, I have just seen this and it's been very transformative. I think I've learned a lot about myself. So yeah. And I also keep telling parents, like, please don't give rewards, be it for food, be it for speech. Like, only when you do this, you get this. I give a sticker to all my kids, irrespective. They've been good. They've hit me probably because they've been upset. They've thrown things. They've broken something. Like, I get that. I don't want them to only have like a good or bad. Like, I'll be like, I don't feel like giving you a sticker today because you are a little too much. Yeah, of course they need to know what they've done as well, which is not okay always. I
yeah.
let them, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't feel like giving you 2 stickers today. I will still give you one. But, I don't want to label it up that, oh, I have to be a good person when I come to me. If you're going to be putting up a facade to me and coming, it's never going to generalize. Your concerns are
Yeah.
never going to generalize. So that's something we have to tell the caretakers, like, you have to eliminate. And I feel just these things are so hard to achieve. Like, it's so basic. It looks so basic, but it's so hard to achieve, like, to eliminate this. So yeah. That was one of my keys. So that's what I learned out of this. This child, we discharged him over a year ago. He's been doing really well in general. We discharged him from OT speech. We reduced his turns. And yeah, I think now he's 5 years old. I miss him. I really miss him, but he's doing really well. So I'm really happy that, he's in a space where he can meet his communication needs. He learned how to regulate himself. I remember we could see him like, move to the side, take a few deep breaths, and then come back in the session and join his kids. And he would be like, I'm not ready for this. And which was great. Like, I was like, okay, this is at least better than him flinging things in the room, that he's coming and telling me that he's not ready to do something. So, yeah, this child truly taught me that early intervention works when you work with everyone as a team. Um, I think this was just during the first entire year I may have worked, or the second year I may have full-time worked in person since my graduation, because like COVID happened and then we were not working in person. So 2022 was an entire year beginning to end, which was my first year working full-time in person. That's when he came in, and it just changed a lot, like, how you can use movement. And I just love it. Like, I love using OT strategies in speech. I feel like it just brings out not just language, but just everyone. It brings out the best in everybody. So that was my biggest take back. And also the fact that when caretakers really take your advice, it really helps
Yeah.
see the progress. And you feel you feel so privileged to be a part of someone's growth. Like, I know a piece of me will always be with him, no matter where he goes in life tomorrow. But it was like I cried when I discharged him because he's so adorable. I was in tears when I discharged him, but I had to do what I had to do as well. So yeah, thank you.
That was really, really great, especially, if this is the kid you worked with through your first year of in-person working. I think this is truly something that's going to stay with you for a long time as well.
For a very long time. I did have a case in AYG also. I remember when I was in college, she was like also 18 months old, and we used a lot of movement, but I don't know how unconsciously I did that back then as an undergrad student as well. Like, she would love
Yeah.
roaming around college in the entire speech department with one pram, and I should just let her move. And sometimes, and I wouldn't see anybody else doing it, but I would still do it. There would be all types of dhamal, all types of like, movement, fun, mess. And I was like, okay, if if you don't want to clean up right now, we'll clean up later. We will also do that. But I think just allowing movement is something I have very unconsciously done through undergrad.
Yeah.
Now, since I've been working full time, it's just been more conscious. It's just when I look back at what I've done in college, I feel great. Like, I feel so proud of myself that I did not discourage movement. And
Movement. And
that's,
enforce sitting. Basically, discourage movement and enforce that sitting is the pinnacle.
like I'm going to go a little off the topic, but
Just a second. Can you take off the screen? Then you'll come, like, you'll be the main screen. Yeah, yeah. Go on, go on.
like, they're very off the topic, but I had a discussion with a couple of teachers once, and they were like, the child doesn't sit still. And what he would do, bechara, like, little older kid, would just extend his arm. See, he's moving. And I was like, can you sit for 45 minutes like a statue? That was literally my question to them. And everyone stared eyes at me. I'm like, I can't. I genuinely cannot. Can you sit? If you can sit, great. Teach me how you're doing it. And they had no answer.
I
And I'm like,
changed my position right now that we are sitting since 3 o'clock, quarter to three. We both are in front of the laptop, right?
I also shifted. Like, I'm also using my body differently. I can't sit like a
Yeah.
statue. How do people expect you to do that? Like, what is this? Why can't we just have a better perception to things? And why is movement such a punishment? Like, there's a difference in being overly stimulated versus basic. But unfortunately, the basic sometimes I feel gets taken across, like, you're overdoing something.
It is, I'll tell you, if a person is able to communicate, like, I work for my exam better if I am walking and I am learning, or I need music and I need to be walking. So if the person is able to tell you this, a lot of times the force and the punishment here, it is like of course, the child is coming to you because of lack of language. The child obviously, in terms of interoception, cannot even recognize that I need movement. That is also what we are teaching through regulation, that you need movement and you need to communicate that to us as well.
Exactly. So,
And because you mentioned AYJ, even I would be very happy if I was doing an assessment or for some reason, instead of the therapy room, I was in that room opposite the supervisor, where two,
yeah,
three of us would be doing.
yeah,
Yeah. So it would be so big, and I still remember I would be talking to the parents, taking the information while observing the child who is like all over the place, like, trying to climb on the window. So when you said that, it clicked that, yeah, even I did not look like the smaller, dingy rooms. I actually liked it when I was in that bigger room and I could
yeah.
see the kid I was assessing interacting with some other kid who my classmate was working with.
Right. Even if they were in a smaller, dingy room, sometimes, they just open all the toys ka boxes.
Ha.
And my only statement to the parent, they'll be like, play with one toy at a time. And I'm like, listen, I have no problem with it. Just make sure your child doesn't hurt themselves physically.
Hmm.
Everything else can be taken care of. I don't want a child falling, hurting their head, toe getting stuck, finger coming in the door. That is something I don't want. Let it be, no. The mess I only have to clean up later, or I'll make the child clean up. I know how to do it. And parents just go like, ऐसे कैसे बोल रही है? And
ऐसे
I'm like,
कैसे बोल रहे हैं
तुम रुको, मेरे को समझ में ही नहीं आएगा what is the child doing. No,
doing.
no, they just don't want to let people be. And I feel like these things, if they're not integrated at this age, your age, you carry it through as an adult. You really do. Like, I think whatever experience you have as a child, they stick with you till you're an adult. Like, you
Yeah,
could be 20 years old, 30 years old, but there are certain things you will never forget. Like, I haven't forgotten what I've experienced in elementary school. I haven't till today. I know everything around it, and my friends are like, how can you hold on to this? I'm like, no, this has hurt me. I'm holding on to this. There's a difference in letting it go. There's a difference in,
processing it.
processing it. But there's also a thing that okay, they may not do it to you again, but the fact that they are capable of doing it to you because that's something that hurt you.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly. And this that you said, use your words. So basically, it comes from a neurotypical classroom setup, that too from the West. Like, it's definitely not an Indian concept. The IB based ones are using it now. So I was speaking to quite a few parents, quite a few of my parents landed up to be teachers at IB school. So it
Okay.
is like in a neurotypical setup, if you suppose if two kids are fighting or something, and you say use your words, what is expected is immediately the child is able to say, like, XYZ took my pencil, or the XYZ pushed me away, or this happened to me. With our kids, when they are neurodivergent and say you use your words, they cannot use their words, and that is the reason they are doing something physically.
Because, like, again, if you think of it very physiologically, it's so much easier for the brain to plan a physical, broader movement than a speech movement. Speech is,
Absolutely.
how do you expect them to do that? And you're obviously going to reach out to the easiest thing. And, I think the Bosmith are not only neurodivergent people, even neurotypical. Sometimes you can't say it. I'm like, give me, give me 2 minutes. You can't instantly respond and
Absolutely.
carry it forward generation to generation. And I'm like, I think now when I see like family friends or, somebody saying, use your words, what is this behavior? And I'm literally like this. I'm like, please stop. Like, how, unfortunately, because they know you, it's so hard to tell them that, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I've had like instances where I have cousins, okay, like who are like still 2 years old, 1 year old, 3 years old, 5 years old, and they were like, of course, not listening to their moms, which I feel like it's most of us. We just don't land up listening to our mothers. And then when I was just like, I remember this child, my cousin had to brush her teeth, and my mommy's like, please get her to brush her teeth. And she was just making a mess of everything. And I just kept telling her, we are both going to brush our teeth. In the count of five, we are going to the bathroom, we're brushing our teeth, and we're coming back and we're playing. And she just went diligently, brushed her teeth, and she came back. And my mommy's literal words to me were like, you please take her away for a week and give me a break and teach her whatever needs to be taught. Like, excuse me. Like, no, that's not happening.
It is daily handling. It is not teaching a trick. It is not teaching a this thing. Yeah. So
Oh, that you can't, you drain yourself out by constantly putting a command on a child. You
yeah.
draining yourself out. The child getting drained out is different, but you drain yourself out in particular. And it's like, it's like I told you, it's the most basic things that people just don't get. It's very
Absolutely.
thick. And I'm like, पहले तुम basic master करो फिर आगे का I'll tell you what to do.
I'll train you.
That I will. That's in fact easier. Like that's all
Yes.
thing I do. So I always take like my eliminating say and using more declarative sentence. I'm
Yeah.
like this long term one. You first learn to master, get the hang of this because this will stick. So
Because it
yeah,
is essentially changing, like when we are training parents, it is changing their habits. And
Mhm.
that itself takes a very, very long time. So essentially, if you follow
As
that, I can give you more language techniques. I can give you more strategies. I can tell you how to combine. But those are the basic ones which we adhere to. We like to adhere to.
absolutely. So yeah,
So Anvita, I'll just share my screen once more. This is, one second. I'll just wait for it to come up. So
no
this is a
worries.
small token of love and appreciation from Insightful for making this so interesting, so relatable, and yeah, it is recorded for people to view it later, understand it, go through the case, and understand basically. And then you're there on social media, so I think yeah, Yashna has something. So
Yeah.
anybody who wants to get in touch, learn more, because you made a lot of concepts very simple and you sort of made it very relevant to the case, which is like very good, very nice. And thank you for accepting the invitation, doing this, making the presentation, and putting it up.
Thank you for allowing me to share something that I have learned, grown with, and yeah, like I'm so happy and I hope to get back in touch with you for some more like these.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'm looking forward to.
Thank you.
Okay, so okay, thank you everyone for attending, and this is going to be available. We'll make sure this is available across different platforms so that you can definitely catch this later also. Okay, thank you guys. Bye bye. Bye, Anvita. Bye. See you.